So this is what we have. We have the US declaring victory, Iran declaring victory, and even the UAE have said they've come out on top in this war. It's so good that we have so many winners, isn't it? But let's be real for a moment. From your point of view, who's the real winner and loser from a strategic perspective here?
Well, I'll start by saying I just hope this ceasefire at least lasts through Orthodox Easter, Pascha, and so we can at least have the second half of this week of peace. The 10 points that are agreed upon, or supposedly agreed upon, look, never mind Israel already broke one of them because they're not stopping the genocide in Lebanon. They're continuing that. The other points, well, the reparations from the U.S. via tariffs for passing Straits of Hormuz, that's probably something that Washington can swallow relatively easily because American companies, by the way, don't particularly bring any oil and gas in from that, and it'll hit mostly America's vassals, so that's not that bad for the Americans. However, leaving the Persian Gulf, the United States is not going to do. Sanctions relief, you can forget about it. I mean, Congress has to pass that. And I think most congressmen would rather eat their own liver than pass a bill like that to relieve sanctions. We've seen that America is very quick to put sanctions on. It's very, very slow to terminate sanctions. Compensation outside of that cost of doing business by passing the tolls, by passing through Straits of Hormuz are absolutely out of the question. There's no U.S. congressman that's ever going to sign up on paying reparations. The U.S. has never paid reparations for any of the destruction it's left in the wake of its little adventures all over the world. So from that point of view, I don't really think this is going to last for those points. Now, having said that, we got to look at what is Washington's big plan. I don't honestly believe that Washington is looking for a peace. It may be looking for a timeout to rearm and prepare for another round, but I really don't believe Washington has suddenly seen the light and said, our ways are wrong, let's have peace. It's just not what Washington does.
Yeah, I mean, you've just given me an extensive list why the two-week ceasefire won't work out. Whether the two sides will actually make it to Friday to those talks in Islamabad is also in question. Let's talk about this rearming period that you talk about. I mean, ceasefires have been known, as we've seen with the Ukraine crisis, that this is a period when the country is used to rearm and regroup. Is 2 weeks enough time to do that, though?
For Washington, well, considering the U.S. is still bringing in assets from everywhere around the world, pulling them in to this theater, and that hasn't stopped, that hasn't been terminated or even frozen in place. Of course, it's not enough for Washington to be able to do anything particularly hard-hitting, but it can continue fighting. Now, if you're looking at replenishment of missiles, no, of course not. Look, if we're looking at THAAD missiles in 2 weeks, they can build about 5 of them. If we're looking at Patriot PAC-3s, in 2 weeks, they can build about 15 of them, maybe 20 if they're really trying. Again, that's not going to make any difference in the long run. Same thing goes with SA-6s or SA-3s. Even the Tomahawks, in 2 weeks, they may be able to put together another 5 to 10 Tomahawks. These missiles are put together by hand to maximize their cost and thus maximize the profit in a cost-plus type of contract that the Pentagon loves. But so this is something that's just simply it's not enough time. Washington to replenish its stores would probably need about 1.5 to 2 years at the rate that it's doing it right now. Even if it doubles production, it's not going to be much of a change, especially in a 2-week period.
The last time we spoke, we brought out the big map. We were discussing the likelihood of boots on the ground, U.S. boots on the ground in Iran via Karg Island. Do you think that's still an option for the U.S.?
I wouldn't say any options are off the map, but we've seen one failed mission. Look, the attempt to the rescue mission. And it was great Hollywood writing as he rode off into the sunset on Easter or the sunrise on Easter and all that. Yeah, it makes great pulp fiction for the masses. But the reality is this was a mission to grab, more likely to grab Iranian uranium, which if there's even 450 kilos of that, and you count the containment facilities, for the radiation. So you're probably looking something close to a ton. What we saw left over was two C-130s and the little boys that they carried in them. I'm sorry, the little birds that they carried in them that the Special Forces guys were riding in. But look, these planes were shot up because there's lots of holes in them from shrapnel and from small arms fire. But the point is, there isn't 100, 150 bodies lying around, so there had to have been more planes than that took the people out of there. More than likely, there's at least two more, if not three more, C-130s that were on this landing strip. This was a big operation. It failed. It obviously failed very, very badly. I don't know how close they ever got to the base. I don't know how they were going to plan on moving 1,000 kilos, a ton of containment and uranium out. But whatever this mission was, it was an absolute failure. We may find out sometime in the next 5, 10 years, somebody writes a book. Maybe not. That there were multiple casualties besides this, absolutely, absolutely. How many casualties, we may never know. But it was a mission failure, obviously, because if they had succeeded, we would have known about it. Trump would have been parading the containment units. He would have been parading his great victory. He wasn't. It went silent. They made up a story about this great rescue. Nobody rescues one guy with 150 people. It doesn't happen, especially if the guy's on a mountaintop. Normally what would happen is one of those pave hawks would fly in as fast as they can, drop a rope or a ladder or a sleigh down to on same thing as water extraction, and get the hell out of there as fast as possible. That's how missions are run. That's how rescue missions are run. You don't bring in basically an infantry company plus to do a rescue mission of this sort behind enemy lines.
And Stanislav, even after all the chaos of the past 24 hours, with the main focus being on the reopening of the Hormuz Strait so we can try to find some normality in the markets across the globe, but it's still no clearer on what's happening. There's so much contradiction, so much lack of clarity. It's being reported the passage will be reopened. At the same time, Trump is suggesting that this will somehow be coordinated with Iran. How do you see that working? And how do you see the fate of the Hormuz Strait in the coming hours and days?
Look, the straits were never fully closed. Let's begin with that. Those countries that were close to Iran, they were allowed through. The Chinese were allowed through. I don't think the Chinese ever paid anything to. Other countries that were not heading to America and not heading to Israel with oil, countries that were told, if you didn't pay in dollars, we're letting you through. You had to pay the toll, but you were let through. So there were plenty of ships that were actually leaving. Pakistan was getting oil. Additionally, there was oil going through Oman to the ports on the Indian Ocean, and the Saudis were still exporting their oil through the Red Sea ports. So there was about, out of 26, 27 million barrels per day, there was probably about 8 or 9 million that were still going as of, and Iran too was exporting. In fact, one of the complaints coming out of Washington was that Iran was actually exporting more oil than it was before the conflict. Go figure. And the U.S. did remove sanctions off of Iranian oil as part of their conquest of Iran. The absurdity, of course, is hard to miss. But the main focus here on what's going to hit long term, no matter what happens, is the lack of gas. The gas facilities are destroyed, heavily damaged. Some people are saying absolutely destroyed. That means the fertilizer is destroyed. LNG is not going to be flowing for at least a year and a half to 2 years, maybe much longer. And that's going to be hits much worse than the oil, the lack or the lack of supply of oil. We're still looking at famine this year in Africa, in parts of Europe, more likely, at least in the lower classes in Europe. Prices for food are going to skyrocket toward the end of the planting season, especially the first harvest. So we haven't dodged the bullet on this, and that's if the straits stay open. There's no guarantee that they will. It all depends on the U.S. Look, like the Iranians said, they already had one drone in the air from Israel. Israel is the spoiler here. Israel is now making noises about let's build pipelines instead of going through the Gulf and going through the Straits of Hormuz. Let's build pipelines into Israel, and that way it'll all go out directly into the Mediterranean, which would explain Israeli desire that everything is damaged and destroyed around the Persian Gulf. If they think that they're going to be able to earn off of this. Look, let's talk realistically. Israel is a psychopathic genocidal regime. The number one thing that drives them is this greater Israel. Oh, and for Netanyahu staying out of jail, obviously. We've heard these Zionist Christian pastors on Easter say that the Iranians want to kill all the Jews, which is ludicrous because there are Jews in the Iranian army, there are Jews in the Iranian parliament, and by the way, a synagogue was destroyed in center of Tehran. And the reason it was destroyed because one of the parishioners in that synagogue is a general in the Iranian army. And the Israelis are trying to assassinate him. So we already see what the Israeli government's about. It's not even about safety for Jews. It's about power. It's about dominion. It's about making money for those people in power. Netanyahu's son and wife from day one were in Florida. They were living for Israel. They're not about to die for Israel. But the common Israeli citizen, he gets sent out to get massacred. The Israeli army is taking massive casualties. The Israeli Air Force is continuing to commit genocide. They're continuing to commit genocide in Gaza. They're continuing to commit genocide in Syria. We're dealing with people that have absolutely zero human morality, maybe except for their own families and what's good for them directly. They're willing to sacrifice their own future, or their country's future, let me phrase it, and their own people for their greater illusions of grandeur. The lucky thing for Israel, of course, is there's America, and America is Israel's financial backstop. The American taxpayer does not have free medicine. The American taxpayer does not have free education. Israel does. The American taxpayer gets to pay for it, and the American taxpayer will be rebuilding Israel at the end of the day. So Israel at least has that security policy that the average American citizen never will.
And also taking an economic hit. The Gulf states, which have been, well, they've suffered a little bit over the past 6 weeks. Now they have this timeout. I'm wondering, once the dust settles, how will their relationship with the US change?
Well, that's a tough one because look, for one thing, they were playing both sides. They all declared their neutrality, but they were all allowing U.S. And Israeli planes to fly through their airspace. Additionally, UAE was sending attack drones into Iran. That's been a proven fact. And they were allowing the U.S. military to shoot from their territories into Iran, which means they are part of this conflict. Countries like Bahrain is now in the middle of a civil war, basically, an insurrection. The Shia, who are 80% of the population, are in open revolt. There's a big question whether that government's going to survive, especially this time around. It's not the first time there's these problems, but the Saudis on the third day sent in their security forces to back them up, and it's still going. So there's a good likelihood that Bahrain may be changing ownership very, very quickly. Now, Qatar, this is a question of whether or not the sheiks in Qatar will even leave or leave permanently. We'll rebuild all of this because, look, this is going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Unless the U.S. is going to fork over that money, they have to take that money out of their accounts. There's no money coming in until that oil and gas facilities are back up and running, until the LNG facilities are back up and running. There's absolutely going to be no money coming in. So will they stay or will they go? That's going to be a very big question. The UAE, in the long run, I think their heyday is behind them. They've jumped the shark, as they would say. Look, they were built on as this island of immunity. They were financially hubs. They had protection from America. Everything's good, but they don't produce anything. They are just a trade hub, a chic place to be. Almost 90% of the population are expats or laborers that come in there, and they all leave, especially the expats. It's now known as an unsafe place. Businesses are running. Banks are moving their personnel out. Will they come back? Maybe, but I think in a much smaller format. So I think their heydays are well past them. So we're going to be seeing a very different Middle East. And by the way, if this starts up again, the Iraqi government, which is part of this war now, could we start looking at Kuwait and returning Kuwait back into Iraq? Because let's not forget the British created Kuwait. Kuwait's the 19th province of Iraq. So again, I think the map's going to be changing severely in the next year, half a year to year.
Always good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.